My name is Nasser, and I never imagined I would be here today, alive to tell you this story. Even now, when I close my eyes, I can still smell the sand mixed with smoke. I hear the muffled screams of the men around me, and the sound of a match being struck comes back to haunt me like a death sentence. But before I tell you what happened in that desert, before I describe the moment they poured gasoline over my body and lit the match, I need to take you back to where it all began. To a life that looked perfect from the outside, but was slowly dying on the inside. To the moment when a simple cup of tea in a dusty shop began to unravel everything I thought I knew about God, faith, and truth. I was born and raised in Riyadh, the son of a respected and feared imam. In Saudi Arabia, being the son of an imam isn't just about family legacy. It's about carrying the weight of an entire community's expectations on your shoulders from the moment you can walk. My father was known throughout our district as a man of unwavering faith, someone who never questioned, never doubted, never wavered, and I was supposed to be exactly like him. From the time I was a small child, my path was already carved in stone. They told me I was the pride of the community, the perfect example of a true servant of Allah. By the age of 12, I was already leading prayers with the practiced voice of someone who knew every syllable of the Quran as intimately as my own heartbeat. It wasn't forced, at least not in the way you might think. It was simply all I knew, all I believed myself to be. My entire identity was wrapped up in being the perfect Muslim son, the faithful student, the future leader who would one day take my father's place. I memorized verses before I understood what they meant. I performed ablutions with precision, said my prayers 5 times a day without fail, fasted during Ramadan, even when the heat was unbearable and my young body screamed for water. I did everything right. I followed every rule, observed every tradition, upheld every expectation. From the outside, I was the model of Islamic devotion, but it was precisely this total surrender that prevented me from realizing for a long time the hole that was growing inside me. There was a silence in my soul that I couldn't name, a strange discomfort that I pushed down every time it tried to surface. It was like being trapped in a room where everyone could see out, except me. I would kneel for prayer, prostrate myself before Allah, recite the words I had spoken thousands of times before, and feel absolutely nothing. My prayers felt like they hit an invisible ceiling and fell back down empty. And this realization began corroding me little by little, a secret decay that no one else could see. At first, I convinced myself it was just exhaustion or perhaps a test of faith that would pass with time. I increased my prayers, added extra fasting days, gave more to charity, studied the Quran with even greater intensity. I thought that if I just did more, tried harder, pushed myself further, the emptiness would fill. But it only grew. Every verse I memorized felt like another brick in a wall that separated me from something I couldn't name. Every prayer felt more mechanical, more hollow. I was going through all the motions of deep faith while drowning in spiritual emptiness. And the worst part was that I couldn't tell anyone. How do you admit to your Imam father that you feel nothing when you pray? How do you confess to your community that the model Muslim they hold up as an example is dying inside? It was on an ordinary afternoon, one of those days when routine feels eternal and unchanging, that something unexpected happened. I was waiting for my car to be fixed at a repair shop near the city center, and I decided to walk to kill time. The heat was oppressive, the kind that makes the air shimmer and distorts everything in the distance. I wandered down a narrow side street I had never noticed before and found a small tea shop tucked between 2 larger buildings. It was simple, almost shabby, with a dusty display window and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. The kind of place I would normally walk past without a second glance. But something made me stop. Maybe it was the heat, maybe it was simple curiosity, maybe it was something else entirely. I pushed open the door and was hit by the smell of cardamom and black tea. The man behind the counter wasn't Saudi. I could tell immediately from his features. Maybe he was from the Philippines or India, one of the countless foreign workers who keep the country running but remain invisible to most of us. He looked up when I entered, and he smiled. It wasn't the forced, fearful smile that foreigners usually offer to Saudis. It wasn't the smile of someone afraid of saying the wrong thing or making the wrong gesture. It was genuine, warm, peaceful. He looked at me as if he actually saw me, not my father's reputation, not my role in the mosque, not the image I projected, just me. He poured me tea without me asking, set it down gently, and went back to cleaning glasses. We didn't speak. But that simple moment, that quiet exchange, lodged itself in my mind and wouldn't leave. There was something about him, something in his eyes, something in the way he moved through that cramped little shop. He had a peace that I, with all my prayers and devotion and religious authority, had never felt, and that peace bothered me more than any criticism or challenge ever could. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about that tea shop and that man. It seemed ridiculous. He was just a simple foreign worker selling tea to passing customers. He probably didn't even remember me. But I remembered him. I remembered that look, that smile, that inexplicable peace, and I started asking myself a question that terrified me. What did he have that I, the son of an imam, the model of Islamic devotion, didn't have? What was the source of that peace? And more frighteningly, why couldn't I find it in everything I had been taught my entire life? It was this restlessness, this childish but persistent curiosity that led me one night to do something I never imagined I would do. I was alone in my study late at night, my wife and children asleep in their rooms. The house was silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning. I sat at my computer, my hands hovering over the keyboard, my heart beating faster than it should have been. I told myself I was just going to do some research, that I was simply trying to understand Christianity better so I could refute it more effectively. That was the excuse I gave myself, but deep down, I knew it was a lie. I wanted to know what was there, what lit up that kind of light in the eyes of people like that tea man. I typed the words slowly, carefully, as if someone might be watching. Gospel of John read online. My finger hesitated over the enter key. This felt like crossing a line, like stepping into forbidden territory. In Saudi Arabia, possessing a Bible can lead to arrest. Being caught reading Christian scripture can destroy your life. And here I was, an imam's son, a religious teacher, about to willingly expose myself to exactly what I had spent my life warning others against. I clicked. The page loaded slowly, and there it was. The words appeared on the screen, and I began to read. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. I read slowly, carefully, ready to close the browser at any sound. But as I continued reading, something happened that I wasn't prepared for. The words seemed to reach through the screen and pierce something deep in my chest. They didn't feel foreign or wrong. They felt like water to someone dying of thirst. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. When I read those words, I had to stop. I physically had to close the laptop and sit back in my chair. My hands were shaking. My heart was pounding. Something had shifted inside me, something fundamental, and I knew with absolute certainty that there was no turning back from this moment. I sat in the darkness of my study for a long time after closing that laptop. My wife was sleeping in the next room. My children were in their beds, innocent and unaware. The silence of the house seemed deeper than usual, heavy with the weight of what I had just done. My heart continued to beat strangely, as if I had been frightened but the fear wouldn't pass. I felt guilty, as if I had committed some terrible betrayal, but at the same time, beneath the guilt, there was something else, a different kind of calm, a presence. It wasn't like the mechanical prayers I had performed since childhood, where everything was repetition and ritual and control. It was as if, in that instant, someone was actually there with me in the darkness, not judging, not demanding, just present. The next day, I went to work as usual. I taught my classes at the mosque. I guided students through Quranic interpretation. I led prayers with the same practiced authority I always had. I repeated arguments against Christians and Jews and all other non-believers with the same confidence I had shown for years. But something inside me had fundamentally changed. And no matter how hard I tried to disguise it, I could feel it. I knew. Something had been planted in me that night, and it was growing. In the following weeks, I returned to reading the Gospel in secret. Always late at night, always carefully clearing my browser history afterward, always listening for footsteps in the hallway. I read about Jesus healing the sick, forgiving sinners, challenging religious authorities, loving the outcasts. I read about grace, about mercy, about a God who pursued humanity rather than demanding humanity earn its way to him. And every word felt like it was written specifically for me, for the emptiness I had been carrying my whole life. I started to dream. Always the same setting, a desert, unbearable thirst and water just out of reach. In one of the dreams, someone approached me and offered me a cup of cool water. I always hesitated to take it, afraid of what it meant, afraid of the consequences. I would wake up sweating, heart racing, the sheets tangled around me. I told no one about these dreams, not even my wife. How could I? In that country, in a house like mine, in a family like mine, this wasn't just prohibited, it was potentially deadly. And yet every night, something inside me pulled me back to those words, back to that presence, back to the question I could no longer avoid. What if everything I had been taught was incomplete? What if there was more? I need to pause here for a moment and ask you something. Have you ever felt that knot in your stomach during a moment that should bring peace? That silent question that terrifies you, the one that whispers, what if everything you've built your life on isn't the complete truth? I remember how utterly alone I felt in those moments, believing I was the only person in the world with these forbidden thoughts. The fear was crushing, but the questions wouldn't stop coming. If you're feeling this way right now, I want you to know something that I wish someone had told me back then. You are not alone. There are thousands of people watching this video who understand exactly what you're experiencing. The fear, the confusion, the silence that feels like it's suffocating you. Would you be brave enough to share just a small part of your journey in the comments? You can simply write, I sometimes question too, or I understand this struggle. Your words, even if they're anonymous, might be exactly what someone else needs to feel less alone in their darkest moment. I know this takes courage. I know some of you may need to use a different account or even a different device. Your safety matters more than anything, but if you can, your comment might be the first time someone else realizes they're not the only one struggling with these questions. Now, let me continue with what happened next in my story. I started to pray differently. Not with the memorized phrases I had repeated my entire life, not in the structured format I had been taught, but simply speaking from my heart as if someone was actually listening to me. And for the first time in my life, I felt that someone truly was listening. I wasn't speaking into emptiness anymore. I could feel a real presence, an actual response, not in audible words, but in the deep certainty that I was heard, that I was known, that I was loved. And that feeling began to be worth more than any rule, more than any tradition, more than any fear. It was after several months of living in this silent tension, this double life of outward conformity and inward transformation, that I realized I had crossed an invisible line from which there would be no return. The moment of recognition came during a class I was teaching on the role of prophets in Islam. One of my students, a bright young man who always asked challenging questions, raised his hand and asked something that caught me completely off guard. "Teacher, If Allah is truly merciful and compassionate, why couldn't He simply forgive humanity without demanding so much sacrifice and perfect obedience? Why does every sin require such strict accounting? That question dismantled me from the inside. His doubt was the exact same one that had been eating away at me for months. And before I could stop myself, before I could think through the consequences, I began to explain the Christian perspective. I spoke about sacrifice, about justice tempered with mercy, about grace as an unearned gift rather than a wage for good behavior. I spoke with such sincerity, such passion, such obvious personal conviction that when I finished, the entire classroom was silent. Students stared at me with expressions ranging from confusion to concern. But what froze my blood was the man standing at the back of the classroom. One of the senior teachers from the mosque, someone who had known my family for decades, had entered quietly in the middle of my explanation. He stood there watching me from the corner, his face unreadable, his eyes locked on mine. When our eyes met, I knew instantly that he had heard everything. I had gone too far. I had revealed too much. The mask had slipped, and there was no way to put it back in place. That same afternoon, I was summoned to meet with the senior imam of the mosque, a firm and deeply respected man who had been a friend of my father for over 30 years. There was no preliminary conversation, no gentle lead-in. He was direct and to the point. He said he had received concerning reports about my teaching style, about my overly sympathetic tone when discussing Christians, about comments I had made that seemed to question fundamental Islamic teachings. He asked if there was something troubling me, if my faith was wavering. I lied. The lie came easily after months of practice. I said it was exhaustion, that I was overwhelmed with responsibilities, that my mind was simply too full. I said I was trying to be thorough in my teaching, to help students understand other perspectives so they could better defend against them. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. But he simply nodded slowly and said that if I was experiencing any doubts in my heart, any questions about my faith, it would be better for me to seek proper guidance immediately. The way he said that last part, it wasn't a suggestion or an offer of help. It was a warning, clear and unmistakable. I left that meeting with my hands shaking, my shirt soaked with sweat despite the air conditioning. That night, for the first time in my life, I couldn't sleep at all. I lay in bed staring at the dark ceiling, listening to my wife's peaceful breathing beside me, feeling my heart race and my hands grow clammy. I knew this was the beginning of the end. I knew that from that moment forward, every step would be watched, every word would be measured, and every prayer would be a choice between living authentically or dying slowly inside. It was shortly after this that I received an unexpected visit from my father. He appeared at my house without any advance notice, which was unusual. We had regular scheduled visits, but this was different. He arrived with that serious expression that I remembered from childhood, the look that meant something important was about to happen. We sat in silence in my living room, him staring at the floor, me not knowing where to look or what to say. The tension was thick enough to cut. Then he asked, his voice calm but cutting, "Do you still believe in what you've taught your entire life? Do you still hold to the faith we raised you in?" I felt my fingers begin to tremble on the arm of the sofa. I tried to keep my voice steady, tried to maintain eye contact, but I could feel myself falling apart inside. He continued before I could answer. He said that people were talking, that rumors were spreading through the mosque community, that my way of teaching had changed, that my posture seemed weak and uncertain. He said this wasn't just about me anymore, that my actions were reflecting on our entire family, on his reputation as an imam, on everything our family name stood for. I lied again. The words came automatically, a survival instinct. I said it was just the weight of responsibility, the pressure of teaching, nothing more serious than that. He looked at me with obvious suspicion, his eyes searching my face for the truth I was hiding. But he didn't press further in that moment. He simply stood up, placed his hand heavily on my shoulder, and said something that still echoes in my mind. "I hope you understand what you're doing, Nasa. A doubt in faith is like a crack in a wall. You might not notice it at first, but sooner or later, it destroys the entire structure." When he walked out of my house that day, I almost collapsed. I sat alone in that living room for over an hour, unable to move, unable to think clearly. From that day forward, everything started to crumble with terrifying speed. Within a week, I was quietly removed from several of my teaching positions at the mosque. The official explanation was vague, something about redistribution of responsibilities, but everyone knew what it really meant. The looks from my colleagues changed. They stopped inviting me to informal gatherings. Conversations would pause when I entered a room. They didn't say anything directly, but they knew something was wrong. They could sense the change in me, even if they couldn't name it yet. The worst moment came on an ordinary evening at home. My eldest son, Khalid, who was 11 years old at the time, was using my phone to look for a game he liked to play. I had become careless, too comfortable, and I had left a Bible app on my phone, hidden behind several other applications. He accidentally opened it while scrolling through my apps. I watched in frozen horror as his innocent face lit up with the glow of the screen, his small fingers scrolling through the Gospel of Matthew. He looked up at me with pure childhood curiosity, no suspicion yet, and asked, "Dad, what is this? Why do you have Christian writings on your phone?" My mind spun frantically, searching for an explanation that would satisfy him without revealing the truth. I invented a story about research for an interfaith debate I was supposedly preparing. I said I needed to understand what Christians believed so I could teach students how to refute their claims more effectively. He seemed to accept this explanation, nodding with that trusting look children have when they believe their parents can do no wrong. But I knew I had made a critical mistake. I knew the walls were closing in. That night, after my children were asleep, I locked myself in my bedroom and cried. It wasn't quiet, dignified crying. It was the kind of sobbing that comes from deep in your chest, the kind that shakes your whole body. I was exhausted from hiding, from lying, from pretending to be someone I no longer was. The weight of the double life I was living felt crushing, unbearable. I fell to my knees beside my bed and prayed, not the ritualized Islamic prayers I had performed thousands of times, but a desperate, broken conversation. "Jesus," I whispered into the darkness, "I'm tired of running. I'm tired of hiding. I need courage. I need direction. I need a way out because I know this can't continue much longer." When I received a formal summons to appear at the mosque for what they called a special consultation meeting, I already knew what it meant. There was no more pretending, no more hiding, no more delays. I was already emotionally saying goodbye to my routine, to my position, to my old identity, to everything that remained of the life I had known. The morning of the meeting, I woke before dawn and sat alone in my study, watching the sun rise over Riyadh, knowing that by sunset, my entire life would be different. They placed me in a small, cold room at the mosque, a space I had never noticed before despite working there for years. It was clearly used for storage, with boxes stacked in corners and old prayer rugs rolled up against the wall. There was a single chair in the center. One of the senior leaders entered, accompanied by two men I had known since my youth, men who had watched me grow up, who had celebrated my achievements, who had praised my devotion. They sat across from me, their faces grave and closed. There was no small talk, no easing into the conversation. The senior leader asked bluntly, directly, "Have you abandoned the faith? Have you turned away from Islam?" I didn't answer immediately. I looked down at my hands, which were shaking visibly on my lap. My mouth was dry, my heart hammered in my chest so hard I thought they must be able to hear it. Then I took a deep breath and made a choice that would change everything. I spoke the truth. I said yes. I said I had found something that no mandatory prayer, no ritual washing, no religious obligation had ever given me. I said I believed in Jesus Christ and that there was no way I could deny it anymore, not even to save myself. The silence that followed was absolutely terrifying. It stretched out for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. One of the men who had known me since childhood lowered his head, unable to look at me. The other stared at me as if I had transformed into a stranger before his eyes. The senior leader stood up slowly, his face expressing something between anger and grief. He left the room without saying a single word. I knew what was coming. I knew that in that stuffy, windowless room, my sentence had already been decided. They left me locked in that small storage space for hours. There was no bed, no water, just boxes of old books and piled cloths. I spent those hours praying, no longer afraid to pray out loud, no longer concerned about who might hear. Jesus had become my only refuge, my only hope. As the afternoon faded into evening, someone finally entered. It wasn't anyone I recognized. The man was younger, harder, with eyes that showed no emotion. He said simply that I was being taken somewhere. He didn't say where. I didn't ask. They bound my hands tightly behind my back with rough rope that immediately cut into my wrists. They placed a cloth blindfold over my eyes, shutting out all light. Strong hands gripped my arms and guided me out of the mosque, through what felt like a back entrance. I was pushed into a vehicle, and I heard the engine start. We drove for what felt like hours, though I had no way to track time. I couldn't see anything. I could only feel the vibration of the vehicle, hear the muffled voices of the men around me, sense the increasing isolation as we left the city behind. No one spoke to me during the entire journey. The silence was more terrifying than any threats could have been. I felt the road beneath us change from smooth pavement to rough, unpaved surface. The sounds of the city faded away completely, replaced by absolute quiet, broken only by the engine and the wind. When we finally stopped, they pulled me roughly from the vehicle. My feet hit soft sand, and I immediately stumbled. The wind was strong and carried strange smells, gasoline and something else I couldn't identify. The absence of any city noise, any human sounds except for the men holding me, told me everything I needed to know. They weren't taking me to a trial. They weren't taking me to a prison. They were taking me somewhere I would disappear completely. In that desert, I would become just another missing person, another name that people would whisper about and then forget. But even in that moment, as terrifying as it was, something inside me had already surrendered. I knew what I believed. I knew who I belonged to now. And if my end was here in this empty desert, then I would face it with the truth on my lips and Jesus in my heart. They pushed me forward across the uneven sand until we reached a spot where the vehicle's headlights cast harsh, dramatic shadows. The hot desert wind hit my face with force, bringing with it an overwhelming chemical smell that I recognized immediately from working on cars. Gasoline. Someone grabbed my shoulders and forced me down to my knees. Another person tightened the rope binding my arms until my wrists burned with pain. I could hear movement around me, footsteps in the sand, low voices conferring about something. My heart pounded so violently I thought it might burst. Then I felt it, the cold liquid splashing over my head, running down my neck, soaking through my clothes, pooling in the sand around my knees. The smell became unbearable, burning my nose and throat. It soaked into every part of me, and I could feel it dripping from my hair, my beard, my clothes. My body began to shake uncontrollably, tremors I couldn't stop even by clenching my muscles. In that moment, I thought I might lose my mind before they even lit the match. My thoughts raced in every direction at once. I thought of my children sleeping safely at home, unaware that their father was kneeling in a desert about to die. I thought of my wife, who wouldn't know what happened to me. I thought of my own father, who had probably made this decision, who had chosen his reputation over his son's life. I thought about running, about screaming, about begging for mercy, but nothing came out. I couldn't move. couldn't speak, could barely breathe. I could only close my eyes behind the blindfold and do the one thing I had left. I prayed. It wasn't an eloquent prayer, nothing rehearsed or theological. I just whispered into the darkness, "Jesus, I'm terrified, but I still believe in you. I still trust you, even here, even now." And that was when I heard the sound that will haunt me for the rest of my life. A dry snap, the distinctive sound of a match being struck. Someone said something in a low voice that I couldn't make out over the roaring in my ears. In the next instant, my world exploded into fire. The heat came before the pain. It was as if the air itself had turned solid, crushing me from all sides with pure, searing heat. Within seconds, my clothes disintegrated. I felt my skin begin to burn, to tighten, to crack. The pain was beyond anything I had ever imagined possible, beyond anything I had words to describe. I screamed. I couldn't hold it back. It was a sound that came from the deepest part of my body, a sound I had never made before and pray I never make again. The smell of my own burning flesh filled my nose, sweet and horrible at the same time, a smell you can never forget once you've experienced it. I thrashed against my bindings, even though I was tied, feeling the fire climb up my legs, engulf my chest, consume my arms. Every second felt like an eternity. My mind couldn't form complete sentences anymore. There was only pain, pure and absolute, and a desperate animal instinct to keep breathing, even as the fire stole the oxygen from the air around me. The flames made their own sound, a low, hungry roar, as if they were a living thing consuming me piece by piece. I could no longer form words to pray. I could only moan, only cry out, only exist in that moment of complete agony. And then, in the midst of that hell, something changed. The fire didn't stop. It was still there, still burning, still consuming. But suddenly, I wasn't alone inside it anymore. I felt arms around me, not physical arms that I could see, but arms I felt with absolute clarity. It was like being held by someone infinitely stronger than the fire, someone greater than the pain. The agony didn't vanish, but it stopped controlling me. I could breathe again. The panic retreated to the edges of my consciousness, and it was in that impossible moment, surrounded by flames that should have killed me, that I heard the voice. It didn't come from outside. It came from within, from a place deeper than my physical body. The words were clear, firm, unhurried, cutting through everything else. "You are mine. I am here with you. You will not face this alone." Those words pierced through the pain, through the fear, through the chaos. I knew then, not believed but knew with absolute certainty, that Jesus was there with me in the fire. Not to remove me from it in that instant, but to ensure I didn't go through it alone. And in that moment, something inside me became calm in a way that makes no logical sense. The peace I felt while burning alive should not have been possible, but it was real. I cannot tell you at exactly what moment the flames began to disappear. There was no countdown, no gradual relief, no natural explanation. One second I was engulfed in fire, and the next there was only smoke rising from my body and the sand around me. The heat was still there, the pain still tore through every nerve, but the fire itself was gone, simply extinguished as if someone had flipped a switch. I forced my eyes open, my vision blurred and swimming. Through the smoke and tears, I saw the men who had done this stumbling backward, shouting at each other in voices filled with fear and confusion. One of them fell to his knees in the sand. Another was speaking rapidly, loudly, repeating phrases I couldn't quite make out through the ringing in my ears. They looked absolutely terrified. I was burned, wounded, still bound, but inexplicably alive. And that reality made no sense to any of us. Gasoline doesn't simply go out on its own. Fire doesn't give up once it has fuel and oxygen. The laws of physics don't bend for anyone. And yet here I was, smoking but breathing, destroyed but alive. I heard one of the men say it was a sign from God, that they shouldn't continue. Another replied angrily that it didn't matter, that I was still a traitor who deserved death. The voices mixed together, nervous and disorganized. The man who seemed to be leading the group raised his hand and ordered silence. They argued for several tense seconds while I knelt there barely conscious, unable to process what was happening. In the end, they made a decision. They would leave me there, in the desert. They said I wouldn't survive anyway, that the desert itself would finish what they had started, and that way they could claim they hadn't actually killed me. I heard vehicle doors slam, engines roar to life, tires cutting through sand. And then there was nothing but silence. A heavy, profound silence broken only by my ragged breathing and the endless wind moving across the dunes. I was alone, burned beyond recognition, tied up, lying in a hollow in the middle of absolute nowhere. I tried to call out, but my throat only produced a weak croak. The sky above me was filled with more stars than I had ever seen, brilliant and cold and indifferent. And even in that condition, broken and dying, I felt something I will never be able to explain adequately. A strange, almost unsettling peace. It wasn't happiness, it wasn't relief. It was simply the deep certainty that my story wasn't ending there, in that desert, that something more was still ahead. I don't know how long I lay there drifting in and out of consciousness, trying to determine if I was still alive or if this was some kind of afterlife. The pain came in waves so intense that sometimes I would black out for a few seconds or maybe minutes. Time had lost all meaning. At some point, I became aware of the cold. The desert that had been unbearably hot during the day turned freezing once the sun set. The same place that had been hell minutes before now felt like ice. My body shook violently, not just from cold, but from shock. I tried to move and felt a sharp, excruciating pain shoot through my back and legs. That's when I noticed that the rope binding my wrists was partially burned through. With tremendous effort, biting my lip until I tasted blood to keep from screaming, I began rubbing the weakened rope against the rough sand and rocks. Every tiny movement sent waves of agony through my burned arms. I don't know how long it took, maybe minutes, maybe an hour, but eventually the rope gave way. My hands fell free, heavy and nearly useless. When I tried to free my feet and stand up, my legs completely failed me. I collapsed sideways, feeling sand stick to my open wounds. I lay there for a moment, considering just staying down, just letting go, just allowing death to come quietly in that cold desert night. It seemed easier than fighting to stand, easier than trying to survive. But something inside me, that same presence I had felt in the fire, seemed to whisper that it wasn't time to stop yet. I pressed my weight onto my arms, then onto my knees, struggling against my body's screaming protests until I finally managed to stand upright. Everything spun around me. My vision blurred at the edges. I saw tire tracks in the sand pointing back toward the direction of the road, but I couldn't go that way. The terror of encountering those men again was more powerful than any logic. So I turned and walked the opposite direction, into the empty desert, toward nothing. Every step was agony. My damaged skin pulled and cracked with each movement. I was leaving a dark trail in the sand, though I didn't realize it at the time. I walked without knowing where I was going, guided only by the stars overhead and a stubborn refusal to lie down and die. I stumbled and fell repeatedly. Each fall tore sounds of pain from me that I didn't even try to hold back. Getting up became progressively harder. My vision was darkening at the edges, narrowing like a tunnel closing. Sometimes I hallucinated. I saw my father standing ahead with his hard, judgmental expression. I blinked, and he vanished. I saw my children running toward me, laughing, calling my name. I reached out but touched only empty air and cold wind. I knew my body was failing, shutting down system by system. But my mind still fought desperately to stay conscious, to keep moving forward. I repeated in barely a whisper, "Please, not now, not yet, just a little further." I don't know if I was talking to Jesus or to myself or to my own failing body, maybe all three. I cannot say how much time passed before I saw it. A light in the distance. At first I was certain it was another hallucination, another trick of my oxygen-starved brain, but the light didn't disappear. It remained steady, faint, but real. I changed direction and staggered toward it, dragging my feet, feeling my body complain with every meter. As I got closer, I realized it was a vehicle stopped on the side of a road. A man was leaning over the open hood, apparently dealing with some mechanical problem. I tried to call out to him, but my voice came out as nothing more than a hoarse whisper. I took 2 more steps, and my legs finally gave up completely. I fell to my knees and then forward onto my face in the sand. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the man turning around startled, his face transforming from irritation to absolute shock, running toward me with his arms outstretched. I woke to the sharp smell of antiseptic and the steady beeping of medical equipment beside me. It took me a long time to understand where I was, or even to remember who I was. The white light above me hurt my eyes. I tried to move and discovered my body wouldn't respond. I felt weight everywhere, tight bandages, tubes connected to various parts of me. A deep, throbbing pain that no longer burned but pulsed from somewhere deep inside. A man was speaking to me in accented Arabic. Then another voice. Slowly, piece by piece, I learned what had happened. The man who found me on that desert road had driven me to a hospital outside the city, a place where they asked fewer questions. No one knew exactly what had happened to me. The doctors said my burns were far too severe for me to be alive. Multiple medical professionals told me quietly that what I had survived made no medical sense. There was no logical explanation for why someone with burns covering that much of their body, who had been without medical attention for hours in a desert, should be breathing and conscious. One doctor, a kind older man with gray in his beard, asked me privately if I remembered being pulled from a fire quickly, if someone had helped me escape before the burns became fatal. I just shook my head slowly. There was no explanation I could give him that would make sense. How could I explain that I was set on fire intentionally, that the fire had burned out while I was still engulfed in it, that I had walked for miles through a desert with injuries that should have killed me? He wouldn't have believed me. I barely believed it myself. I spent weeks drifting between consciousness and sleep. Sometimes the pain was so intense that unconsciousness was a mercy. At the times, I would wake suddenly, convinced I was back in that desert, smelling gasoline, hearing the match strike. At those moments, I would feel that same presence I had felt in the fire, and slowly the panic would recede. Jesus was still there, still with me, even in that hospital bed, thousands of miles from anywhere I had ever called home. My family never came. I learned later that officially I no longer existed. My name had been removed from records. My father had declared me dead to the family. In their eyes, I had ceased to exist the moment I confessed faith in Christ. And strangely, that knowledge didn't fill me with bitterness or anger. I simply accepted it. Something inside me understood that the old life, the old identity, the old Nasser, had to die for me to truly live, not the way I had lived before, performing and pretending and dying inside, but truly, authentically alive for the first time. When I was finally able to speak clearly and stay conscious for extended periods, someone quietly explained to me that I couldn't return to Saudi Arabia, ever. That I would need a new identity, new documents, new everything, that for my own safety, I needed to disappear completely. They connected me with people, Christians who worked underground helping converts escape, who arranged for documents and transportation and safe passage. I was eventually moved to a refugee center, then processed through channels I still don't fully understand, until I finally arrived here in the United States. Today, as I tell you this story, I still touch the scars on my arms and back sometimes, Not because they hurt anymore, but because I need to remind myself that it all actually happened, that it wasn't some fever dream or metaphor. The scars don't cause pain now, but they also never disappear. They're a permanent reminder written on my body of what I survived, of what I walked through, of what I was willing to lose for truth. Sometimes in the silence of the night, when everything is still and I'm alone with my thoughts, I remember the fire. I remember the smell, the sound of that match striking, the moment the world exploded into heat and pain. But what comes back most powerfully isn't the agony. It's that feeling of being held in the midst of it, of not being alone, of hearing that voice say, "You are mine." That memory is stronger than the trauma. That presence is more real than the scars. I can't explain to you in scientific terms why the fire went out. I can't provide a logical, rational explanation for why I survived injuries that medical professionals say should have been fatal. I have no technical, religious, or intellectual answer that will satisfy skeptics or doubters. I can only tell you what I experienced, what I felt, what I knew in that moment with absolute certainty, and no one can take that from me. The strangest thing about my story is that the miraculous moment wasn't followed by more miracles. There was no other dramatic vision, no other audible voice, no other supernatural sign. It happened once, at one specific point in time, a moment when heaven seemed to open and close again. And then life simply continued. I continued. I learned English, found work, built a new life from nothing in a country where everything was foreign and strange. I connected with a church community who helped me process my trauma and understand my new faith more deeply. I was baptized in a small ceremony that meant more to me than any achievement from my old life. I began slowly, carefully, to build an identity as someone who had been reborn, not just religiously, but in every possible way. People sometimes ask me if I miss my old life, my family, my position, the respect I commanded in that community. The honest answer is yes, sometimes I do. I miss my children terribly, even though I know they've been told I'm dead or that I betrayed everything good. I miss my wife, even though she's remarried now to a man my father chose. I miss the familiar streets of Riyadh, the smell of cardamom coffee in the morning, the sound of the call to prayer echoing through the city. I'm human. Those losses are real, and pretending they don't hurt would be dishonest. But would I go back? Would I trade what I have now for what I lost? Never. Not for a single second. Because what I lost was a life built on emptiness, on performance, on a spiritual void that was slowly killing me from the inside. What I gained was truth, freedom, peace, and a relationship with God that is actually real rather than ritualistic. I lost respect and position and family, but I gained my own soul. And that trade, as painful as it was worth everything. After everything I lived through, I can say with absolute certainty that no one who genuinely encounters Jesus Christ stays the same. The transformation isn't always dramatic or visible from the outside. Sometimes it's quiet, internal, a slow reshaping of everything you thought you knew. But it's always real. The pain that was destroying me inside turned into a testimony of faith, forgiveness, and genuine hope. The fire that burned me on the outside was nothing compared to the spiritual fire that burns in me now. The fire of Christ's love that consumes but doesn't destroy, that purifies rather than reducing to ash. If this story has spoken to you, if something in what I've shared has resonated with questions you've been carrying silently in your own heart, please don't ignore that feeling. Maybe God is reaching out to you today in this moment. Maybe you're exactly where I was several years ago, going through all the motions of religious devotion, but dying of spiritual emptiness inside. Maybe you're terrified of what might happen if you acknowledge the doubts you've been pushing down. Maybe you feel completely alone in your questions. I want you to know that you're not alone. If this testimony has touched your heart in any way, I encourage you to reach out. There's a community of people who understand exactly what you're going through, who have walked similar paths, who can offer support without judgment. By subscribing to this channel, you'll join others who are on this journey of seeking truth, of questioning inherited beliefs, of finding courage to follow where honest inquiry leads. We share new stories every week, testimonies from people all around the world who have experienced their own encounters with Christ, who have paid various prices for following truth, who have found freedom on the other side of fear. Whether you're just curious, actively questioning your current faith, or already secretly following Jesus but feeling isolated, this space is for you. No pressure, no judgment, just authentic stories that might speak directly to the questions you've been carrying. We understand that for some of you watching this, simply clicking subscribe might feel dangerous. We respect that. We know that in many places around the world, exploring Christianity can put you at risk. Your safety matters more than anything else. If subscribing feels too risky, you can watch without subscribing. You can use private browsing. You can take whatever precautions you need. But if you can safely connect with this community, you'll find people who understand your unique challenges and who want to support you wherever you are in your journey. Remember, the same Jesus who found me in my isolation, who held me in the fire, who gave me courage to keep walking when I wanted to give up, can find you too. You don't have to walk this path alone. You don't have to carry your questions in silence. There are others who understand, who care, and who want to help. Subscribe if you can. Like this video if it spoke to you, and comment below with your own experience or simply to let others know they're not alone. My prayer for you is that you find the courage to follow truth wherever it leads, that you experience the peace that comes from a genuine relationship with God rather than empty religious performance, and that you discover you are loved far more deeply than you ever imagined possible. May God bless you and guide you on your journey. And may you find, as I did, that the cost of following Christ, as high as it sometimes is nothing compared to the treasure you gain in return.